Today is the first episode, and we are privileged to have Paula Hilliard from San Antonio and Aileen Blachowski from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, specifically Prosper ISD. Hey, ladies, glad you could join us.
Thanks,
Thanks so
Melissa.
much for having us.
Yeah, I have to say we're all dressed in black, and I think that's so funny, but you both look so good. Well, I thought today we could just focus on what on earth is happening in Texas, specifically as it relates to parental rights. How are parental rights being violated across the state of Texas? You guys are both in big metropolitan areas, one in obviously the north part of the state, one in the central part of the state, but we are seeing these things everywhere. It does not discriminate, big and small school districts alike. Maybe if you're in a small town farming area, you're able to stand on the wall and keep these things from coming in, but it is not a small feat to do so. And so today what I'd like to do is just have a broad conversation about the type of parental rights that are being violated. And so if I were to ask you first, and Aileen, let's start with you. You have become an expert in all things education as far as I am concerned. And so what brought you to that point in your life? Why is this stuff that you spend your time volunteering doing, understanding what's going on in education in Texas?
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. Well, my husband and I are blessed to have 6 kids, and early on, we met some fantastic families, and they encouraged us to consider homeschooling. And I really didn't think I was ever going to be a homeschooler, but someone suggested if you can, put your child in preschool and homeschool at the same time and just see how this works for your family and see what that educational modality is like, you know, for you and for your child. And at the time, I think I had 3 little ones, and my oldest one was going into preschool. And that was an interesting thing. You know what? The whole rigmarole of getting everybody ready, getting in the car, getting the car seats, getting down to school and all that thing. You know what? Homeschool was a better choice for us. And I met homeschool families, and they really encouraged me. They seemed to have really well-adjusted kids. They were smart and curious and well-mannered. And I thought, you know what? That's the model for my family. So for 8 years, that was the beginning of our educational journey. And then as our family grew, and we moved to different places, kids needed different things. And so we kind of came in and out of homeschooling or private schooling, but I never had kids in public school. I was always someone who had a huge heart for the pro-life movement, and I did a lot of sort of leadership and engagement and activism in that in Southern California. And through that, friends that I met brought me to the awareness that it was Planned Parenthood that was taking over sex ed in our schools, and that there was actually a law that California passed called the California Healthy Youth Act, and they were going to mandate comprehensive sex ed in public schools. And I said, not my monkey, not my circus. Sorry for y'all, but I'm staying out of this one. But they just kept tugging at me, and they said, we know what gifts you have, and we need your help. And I didn't want to do this. I had never had an interest in public education, but they started showing me the content, and just this heart of justice just raged up in me as a parent. And I just thought, how unconscionable to violate the dignity and the innocence of children with this kind of content. It was so vile and so purposeful and so in your face, and to mandate it by law. Schools could not get out of this. And it just set a fire in me. And I just said, you know what? I can't not help. And so that began a journey for me in terms of education activism. I've always been a person who could uptake, you know, a lot of information quickly. And I ended up doing that in education, and ended up working all the way up to the legislature, becoming a co-founder of Informed Parents of California, and helping tens of thousands of parents throughout the state fight back and to try and modulate the way that comprehensive sex ed would be delivered in their district. It was an incredible fight. We did a lot of sex ed sit outs and then rallies at the Capitol, and we went through things like the education framework for health, and really pushed a lot of things back, got in front of legislators, things I never thought I would be doing. And it was an incredible learning and opportunity. We did what we could, but we were up against a supermajority of Democrats, and we couldn't even get a bill passed in California, couldn't get it out of the Senate Education Committee to allow parents in grades K through 6 to be able to see the curriculum online. Just transparency. Couldn't get that done. Obviously, the pandemic hit, and we knew we would be through with California. So I moved here to Texas thinking that we'd be free of all that. And I was wrong. I was wrong.
Oh, no.
I never expected to find Texas schools in the state that I found them. And unfortunately, I saw all the hallmarks. It wasn't comprehensive sex ed. That wasn't the lane they could take here. They take the path of least resistance. And here in Texas, that was through things like parental rights and social emotional learning, and just a lot of the race baiting and a lot of the critical theory driven methods, which teachers can use to still bring in a lot of cultural issues we don't want to see in our school. They're taking away from our education. So here I am fighting the same battles, a little bit of different language, but it's all the same stuff. And so that's it in a nutshell. That's how I got here. A reluctant soldier.
Texas is so lucky to have you, because there are lots of things that I think we know that we would not know if Aileen Blachowski and her family did not live in Texas. So thank you for that. And Paula, your story is different. Tell us about how you got to the point where you are so knowledgeable about what's going on in the San Antonio area schools, and Texas as well, but specifically San Antonio, I guess.
All right. Sure. Thanks again for having me too. Well, I grew up here in San Antonio and am a product of public schools. Always have supported them. I think most of us have educators in our family, teachers and things. And so, I think I just grew up loving going to school, loving all the opportunities like sports and things like that. And then I went around with my husband while he served in the military. And then upon his retirement, we said, where do you want to go? Let's go back to where we grew up. So we did that, put our kids in public school proudly. Again, mostly so that they could have a variety of experiences, including the things like sports that these big schools can afford to do in a large scale. And but I went in thinking it's just like it was when I grew up. And I go in trusting, we're in an elementary school where parents are allowed on campus almost every day. We're throwing parties through the parent-teacher organization. It's fun. And you get to know all your teachers. You're helping the kids read. And it was great. Loved every teacher we have ever had. It was, really no issues with the teachers. But I started to, you get to know them and you start to hear things like, well, we're not being supported. This is not making sense. We want to give enrichment to the kids, but our hands are being tied, whether it's by the district with their newest, latest program that they want us to do, or by the legislature, which is taking teachers away from kids who need enrichment activities to focus solely on remedial students. The teachers are getting burned out and overworked. And the performance, I think they rely on these smart kids to do well on these standardized tests, but they're not being pushed to their maximum potential. And so, as a parent, my eyes started to slowly get opened, that there were so many lost opportunities, that we were letting our brightest kids just kind of be okay here because it was still good enough for the state exam. And then all this attention was on the students who, needed a little more attention. And while that's good, I always wondered, I found that my children were being paired with somebody like this, and they were teaching them as a second grader, as a third grader. And I was not okay with that. I think it's good to have compassion and to help others and to do that, but that's not appropriate in a learning environment where it's called the kind of mainstreaming. Whereas if maybe they clustered kids of similar abilities together, they could all be pushing them, and the teacher wouldn't be trying to teach 5 different levels of lessons within one classroom. Who would want to do that that's exhausting for teachers. So I started noticing that. I started noticing the discipline was being handled very differently. Teachers could no longer send the children to the principal. And I was watching them have to deal with one child while no one was learning. And so I started just really standing up for my teacher friends, at least in my heart, but verbally I was starting to kind of question things. And anyway, so that rolled into more and more things. I was noticing how bullying was handled or mishandled, and how all these kind of great ideas really all had these terrible side effects. These good intentions, I say good intentions with air quotes because maybe they weren't really good intentions, but things that sound good never turn out to be that way, because there's always a loophole, there's always a catch, and it's usually tied to money. So I'll probably touch on a few of those, but I think I'll leave it there because I'm coming up with so many things I want to talk about, but that's just kind of how I got interested in things.
Yeah. And those of you, oh, I'm echoing all of a sudden. That's not good.
Here, I'll mute.
Okay, let's try that. Okay. So both coming from really very different backgrounds, but with very good intentions to understand what's happening in the public schools. And in a lot of ways being surprised specifically that it's happening in Texas or in our hometown school that we grew up in, that we never in a million years thought we'd go back to and see it totally different. And I think that's happening to a lot of people all across the state, whether it is their school district they grew up in, or whether they moved here from California or Washington during COVID, trying to come to the most conservative state on the planet. When it comes to conservative values and public schools, how well do our public schools rate?
Well, I would say that what I have found to be true here, and I hope most Texans will not take offense at this, but there is broadly an acceptable veneer of Christian culture everywhere that I have been. I'll tell you, I mean, these things meant a lot to me when I got here. The town I landed in, all of our town vehicles, our police and fire vehicles, city vehicles, everything, they all have our town motto on them, and it's "In God We Trust." There's a church, too, on every block and on every corner. I mean, they're everywhere. And most people, when I was shopping around for homes here, they would say, "Oh, do you know what church do you go to, or have you found a church?" You know, when we first moved here. So I had a sense of comfort about a Christian culture that existed here that upon settling in, I don't see reflected in the schools so much. I will say this, when the track team gets together for the banquet, they have a student come and pray before the track banquet. I can't even tell you, I was near tears the first time I experienced this here in Texas. That did not happen in California. We did have school board meetings that would occasionally start out with an invocation, but they would invite every kind of faith leader to those meetings. Here, I've seen a lot of Christian leaders, a lot of Christians pray Christian prayers to one God, you know, and that gave me a sense of peace until I realized it pretty much only went surface deep, and ultimately, when you dig below the surface, most of the school board members in my area attend the same church. Most of them probably vote conservatively, and they would tell you that. What we're seeing reflected in the school beyond that, in terms of the way that discipline is handled, the way that student dignity is managed, that parent rights and having respect for the family, the institution of the family, yeah, none of that I don't see coming through beyond the surface.
Yeah. Paula, what about you? And don't feel like you have to wait for me to call on you. Feel free to just chime in.
Okay. I think I see, really, it's fundamental. The family is fundamental. It's the fundamental building block of our society. And I have seen, surprisingly, how much public schools try to drive a wedge between the parent and the child. And that surprised me. That really surprised me. I think it starts it does start at the top. So with the board of trustees, I believe, what I've come to believe is that they are, no matter what religion they might have on Sunday, or even on non-board meeting days, when it comes to a board meeting, they take off their faith like it's a coat, like it's a jacket. And I feel as if many of them that's trained into them. And it takes a very, very strong spine and a very strong faith to understand the primacy of God does not go away just because you are sitting in a chair behind a dais and they tell you that it's separation of church and state, or whatever they do. There's a mantra that says you have to take care of every child, and you can't do anything unless it's for every child, but that only seems to work in one direction. It doesn't work in the other direction as well. Anyway, so there's all these, I feel like it's coming from the same place through law firms, through training outlets that tell these people that your job is to basically do what we say, and you can't have any personal faith, but faith informs everything you do if you are a person of faith. And so it is very confusing when you watch people who worship and you know where they worship and they act completely contrary to that and have total peace about it. Well, at least they act like they have total peace about it. When the two don't work together. People elect you knowing that you have a certain faith and they expect you to live it. And then you get there and then you don't. It's a bit disappointing. But it's also at the local level. We have, a lot of Christian parents are just, so loving and trusting. They want their teachers to like them, and they want their students to be good to their teachers. But so when something bad happens, they won't say anything because they're afraid I'm going to hurt my teacher's feelings. They're not remembering that they have this duty and authority. And I think that's been kind of taught out of parents. Like, trust us, we're the experts. You let us manage all of this, and you help with homework. And over the years, that's just become the message that too many Christian parents have accepted. And so it's from both ends. It's not just what the district's doing. It may be these messages that are filtering down, and there's for some reason a guilt of coming up against your teachers. So I don't just complain about that. I actually have ideas to solve that, to resolve a lot of that, where we can restore that relationship between the parent and the teacher, which is absolutely essential to your child's education.
So you said a couple things. You said driving a wedge between the parent and the child, and then you also talked about the relationship between the parents and the teachers. Yeah. And none of that is like it was when I was in school. Everybody was on the same team, everybody working towards the same goal, went to the same church on Sunday. And then now we have these basically wedges everywhere. What type of wedges are you seeing between parents and their children? Like, give me some examples of what you guys have seen in the classroom or at board meetings. It doesn't matter, just whatever you might define as a wedge.
I'll throw one out. As soon as they get into 6th grade, the teachers only communicate with the students through an email that you don't have access to. You have no idea. It might be sometimes through an app or through Google Classroom, but it's also through their student emails. And I have had, I don't know how many parents tell me the same story, that their child gets kind of in trouble with the teacher if they have mom or dad email. If mom or dad emails that teacher, the student gets an earful in class in front of all their peers to discourage all the other kids. Don't tell your mommy and daddy to email me. You have to solve it. They're 11 years old. Some kids are 10. And I'm sorry, but I'm not 10 anymore. I still need my parents. That is a wedge. And so this kind of, I think teachers may mean well, because probably they're getting training that says you need to help these children be responsible so they're ready for college. Well, okay, but that's also our job. And they're 10 or 12 or 14. And I have a right to know, we've had inappropriate things happening between teachers and students through email and things like that. And I think anytime you contact a student, you copy the parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would not have ever guessed that would be something that would start that young. And even with my 16-year-old son, I would never expect to find out that the teachers were secretly communicating with him and not wanting him to include me in any conversations. So that's just awful. Aileen, have you seen anything like that or something different that puts a wedge between parents and kids?
Oh my goodness. You know what? I think there are a lot of things we could talk about, but I'm going to bucket mine into just a few different areas. First of all, just curriculum access and transparency. Wow, cannot believe the hoops that many parents have to go through to figure out what's actually being taught to their children, who brought it into the classroom and made those decisions, and what's the source of it. In my school district, we are a district of innovation. and that is a certain designation for school districts in Texas. And parents should look into what a district of innovation is. You can go on the TEA website and just plug that in and learn about it, and then find out if your district is a district of innovation and in what areas. What is your innovation? Well, in Prosper ISD, our district of innovation includes two things. One is professional learning communities, and the other is basically this intelligent by design concept of how they create curriculum. Basically what this creates is professional learning communities and a way to distill information and to create curriculum that makes it almost impossible to find out who's responsible for the content that is in your child's classroom. So I'll give you a quick example. I had a parent come to me and say, I see that we have something coming up on Martin Luther King week. I'm concerned about whether there might be CRT in these lessons. How do I find out? And I said, well, ask your teacher. So the teacher sends the weekly, basically it's like the newsletter. We're covering this Monday, this Tuesday, this Wednesday, etc., one line at a time. The long story short is that doesn't tell you what the content of the lesson is. So then you go beyond that. And then the teacher has to go to curriculum and instruction or a curriculum coach or to the assistant principal. And then they're speaking to the district curriculum and instruction folks. And next thing you know, you get a rubric or a framework, but you're still not looking at a book. You're not looking at the entire video that's being shown to class. You're not looking at the worksheet that your child will be asked to fill out, nor are you looking at the teacher script, which directs the teacher to teach your child in a particular way. Unbelievable what parents have to do, how many layers, how many contacts they have to make in order to find out just what exactly is being presented to your child. It's maddening. So curriculum access and transparency, a big, big deal. We're not dealing with actual books anymore. Ask to see your child's math book. I mean, the instructional book, not the workbook. Ask to see a math book. You're not going to find one, okay? That kind of thing. Parents are just getting outlines and frameworks. So that's a big one for me. The second one is First Amendment violations or public meetings violations. Parents are getting criminally trespassed in their own school boards trying to exercise their First Amendment rights to redress their government with serious issues. And parents across the state, since I moved here, I have heard of at least I don't know, probably close to 10 cases of it that I'm aware of. You know what? This is inexcusable. School districts just can't decide that they don't like what we're talking about and therefore, tell you can't be a part of your child's education or step on their campus. That's a major violation of separating a parent from their child's learning and their learning ability and being able to express themselves, redress their governments. And the last one is social emotional learning, where there are just that's an endless stream. It could be an entire podcast all on its own, but let's suffice it to say that social emotional learning is essentially, one, it's been all redefined. All the goals of SEL have been redefined in 2021 by the main organization that's pushing these competencies, and the competencies have new goals under the guise of transformative SEL. And if parents looked at the kinds of teaching methods and the content that's coming to their kids under the guise of transformative SEL, which all SEL is today, they would be floored. It's not an education, it's an indoctrination. Our kids are being surveyed, they're being surveilled, their data is being collected. It's a violation of parental rights, it's a violation of federal laws on student privacy and data collection. It's a massive, massive violation of parental rights and a major separator between parents and kids, because students are literally being trained to trust the adults in the school environment. No. Just like you mentioned, Paula, don't email with your parents. Come over here. Tell us about your feelings. Let's talk about your goals. How about your behavioral standards? Is there anything you want to improve? Anything you want to tell me? Anything you want to talk about? Do you need to talk to a counselor? Would you like to go now? Is there something? It's just unbelievable. So
I'm already freaking out with all those questions.
You know what? And so why wouldn't it freak our kids out? And we're taking all this time away from instructional time to go through these things. Schools are becoming not an instructional environment, an educational environment, but a therapeutic one. And it is literally driving wedges between students and their parents and their families all day long.
Oh, go ahead, Paula.
No, that's true. I have a master's in psychology, but I can't practice without being licensed. I can't even do a survey if I'm doing research and want information without getting full informed consent from, they have to know, here's what I'm doing with your data, here's where I'm going to be sending it, and this is how I'm going to protect your identity, this is any side effects that could occur, and none of that exists. It's as if the parents, we were just placed in a box, and almost considered in so many cases like nuisances, and like, you offend me that you asked for the curriculum, you don't trust me, not every teacher, it's not, but there's a cultural shift that I've seen that's normalized it for the kids. It's normalized it for the professions, that whether it's the counseling profession at school or the teaching or the administrative profession. Again, there's exceptions, but a lot of those people are burned out and retiring because they know that this is so far away from the purpose of education, which we should talk about. It's math, reading, science, social studies, and it's to preserve our free society. That's why we pay for public schools, to preserve our way of life. And the law says the only way we can do that is if we have parents completely included in that process. And so this is taking out the parent process. It's violating these rights. So it's actually restricting our society. But it's one of those things that if you just come to work and do your job and go to your training and fulfill it, so you make your bosses happy, you may not step back and see that big picture. And if you're a parent who loves everything and, I just want to be happy, you may not step back and see that picture. And people like me just sound like mean people, but it's just, sometimes, I feel like one of the gifts God has given me is that ability to put this big picture together and to see things 10 steps before they happen. And I see it happening. I see it coming, and not everybody has that vision. So one of the tricks that, for me is how do we, why it's sad that we can only help parents when their rights have been violated or their kid's been traumatized. And then all of a sudden they're like, I need help. I have not figured out personally how to get in front of this and have these conversations so that it doesn't have to get to that point, and that the teachers know we love them, but let's let them see what's actually happening to their profession.
Yeah.
To your point, Paula, I had over a 30-minute conversation with a teacher who delivered an SEL self-assessment in a Spanish class recently. And I just asked a lot of questions, and she was a delight to talk to. So again, to your point, this isn't really about the teachers, but what I learned in that conversation is that, and she shared this freely, and I appreciate it. I'm not going to throw her under the bus, but I asked her, what was she teaching? Where was she at with the curriculum, and what concepts had they covered? Where would they be going the rest of the semester so that I know what I could engage my son on, in this particular area in Spanish too? And she said, I said, which verb conjugations have you gotten through, and which ones do you have left, and that sort of thing. And she said, that's the way we used to do it with the old teaching methodologies. The new teaching methodologies that we have, ... essentially leading to the idea that student wellness is a part of everything. Mm-hmm. And so a student wellness in a self-assessment in Spanish class, completely written in English, by the way, and to be turned in for a grade before we made sure that it wouldn't be. The whole rest of the semester, they're going to talk about these feelings, these goals, these areas, these domains of these SEL self-assessments in their resolutions, not conversations that should be happening. This is private protected information, but the new teaching methodologies are what are driving these into the classroom. To your point, I do think teachers are getting caught in the crosshairs. No one told them that this assignment would be a violation of federal law. No one thought to look it up, I don't think. She did admit it. Yikes, looks like it could be a violation of that Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, a federal law. But she got caught in the crosshairs there. That's not her fault. I don't hold her responsible, but I can see that the whole systemic, just education, it's pushing this in. The districts are just taking this on. They've got these coaches, these wellness coaches, and they're just pushing this stuff into curriculum. It's not fair to our teachers, and it's certainly not fair to families and students. And they don't really want to do this. 15-year-old boys do not want to sit around and talk about their feelings.
No. And, you both said some things. the environment and the way that we're teaching has changed. This
Yes.
new way of teaching. We no longer have textbooks. If we want to help our kids read ahead, there's no way to do that because there's no next chapter to look at. If we want to evaluate and help our kids study for something, we can't go to a book and help them study. We have to go to a teacher guide that the teacher created that only has part of the information on it. And so we can't even really see what they're being taught in the classroom. I've heard legislators say, not all of them, but some of them, and I've heard superintendents say, and administrators and school board members say, we could never go back to textbooks. The kids like being on technology. Technology is the way of the future, and that's just the way education needs to be. And, Texas Education 911 is not about what legislators think. It's not about what superintendents think. It is about what parents want and desire, which is what our education system has totally forgotten. So as parents and as representatives of multiple parents, you guys interact with lots of parents every day, all the time. Do parents want all this technology in the classrooms? Do they not like textbooks? Are we happy textbooks are gone? What do parents want?
Gosh, in my experience, parents are way, way over the technology. I would venture to say that teachers are too, because they can't get kids off of phones in the junior high and high school. Most parents I've talked to are desperate to get K through 3, like every stitch of technology out of the classroom. Kids aren't reading on grade level. Reading isn't going to happen with screens, taps, and swipes. It's going to happen because there's a relationship there and somebody sits next to them and they open the book, they turn the pages, and they teach them to love the art of reading and decoding. And it just, it's a natural inclination for a child to learn. You can't have that kind of relationship with a screen. And so most parents are seeing that, but I will say this. I have one child in a classical charter academy, and they don't use technology. And so there's something to be said for both the methodologies and the technology. There are two parts to the solution, and I think we have to look at both.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think everything you said, and I'm just thinking of the way we learn. And I remember reading, it would be a history, a lot of facts, which is not my thing. I'm not great with remembering detailed facts. I like the bigger picture, putting logic and things like that, but not like 1776 in May, this happened. I don't know, but I was going to be tested on it. But so, we'd had these books, we'd be reading every chapter for the third time before the test. And I would be in a test and go, I remember it was on that page with this picture and it was on the upper right corner. And then I could recall it. And we don't have, a screen is a screen. And the other thing that really bothers a lot of us, there's no spelling anymore. There's no spelling tests because your computer fixes it for you. They don't have a dictionary. You just trust everything that's online. Well, that's how they just change the definition of everything. It's constantly happening. So we're teaching kids to rely completely online for truth, and as a Christian, I have a very hard time with that. That's not all right with me. They need to be able to look inside, to speak to people that they trust, to go to old resources and multiple variety of resources. And anyway, so yeah, the more the screen time, the shorter the attention spans are getting, and then the spelling is always corrected for them. So same with the reading and how we learn. So I think there's a balance, and we want them to have skills with, whatever they need, spreadsheets and document, creation and things like that. And yes, we need all that, but the delivery, does it need to be, they don't have lockers anymore, probably because it's helping them to justify no textbooks. Sorry, it's no lockers. Well, they can have it in the classroom, and maybe everyone gets a take-home set. So I don't know that that's even an excuse, but.
Well, and I think too, in this post-COVID world, honestly, we did have a significant dip in scores statewide, but across the entire country. COVID was devastating for student learning. And these computers are not really helping us catch up. I know the numbers look like, hey, we're recovering, and the TEA shows that in their graphs and charts, and they want us to believe that, look, we're making gains. But I think those gains have to be very critically reviewed, because if 52% of Texas kids K through 12 are now reading on grade level, what about the other 50%? And if 40%, and you can find this on TEA's website today, you can look at their slides for their sort of statewide presentation on the 2022 STAR results. 40% of kids are meeting grade level. Look, that means 2/3 of our kids are not. This is devastating. We are 2 years post-COVID, and studies that were conducted post Hurricane Katrina showed that if you had to displace kids from their schools and their learning environments, within 2 years, if they didn't make up learning loss, particularly in the area of math, they just don't make it up. We are literally headed for a cultural and a professional disaster. How does our economy keep rolling when our kids can't do math and they can't read? One of my kids in high school literally said to me about 2 months ago, "So I guess I kind of figured out I've become a slow reader." And I said, "Excuse me?" "Excuse me?" And he said, "Yeah, because we don't really have to read anything anymore." And that just said everything I need to know. Not acceptable, not for my kid, but not for any kid in Texas. Our kids, our tax dollars, all of us, we all deserve better than that.
Yeah, we definitely do. And talking about COVID and scores and recovering, COVID was absolutely devastating. But I also noticed when I looked at the scores, even prior to COVID, our numbers were terrible. Even prior to COVID, we had a very small number of kids who actually mastered mathematics for their grade. And we're talking like less than 20%. In a lot of areas, less than 10%. And so, and reading, stronger numbers, but still very abysmal. And so even if we were to recover to pre-COVID levels, is that something that we should be happy about? Is that all we're trying to do is recover from COVID levels, or do we want better than that?
Oh, I definitely think we want much better than that. You know, when I was homeschooling, I would look at everything in the teacher guide and the teacher manual, because I would say to myself, well, I'm not a trained teacher. I don't have a degree in these things, so I better read everything here about how to do it and the functions and the methodologies and the everything. And I don't know what's happening on the teacher end of these. You know, I mean, obviously we're seeing slide presentations like PowerPoints to literally walk our kids through their day. And we're seeing SEL and these types of things take over instructional time. Our kids are literally in the midst of a failed experiment. It's time to stop it because it's almost unrecoverable right now. We need so much more for our kids. And reading, okay, reading is the fundamental building block of every other kind of learning they can do. If we don't recover reading, do you know what's a weirder thing? I'm just going to bring this up really fast. I was listening to this Science of Reading podcast.
Me too.
Right? You can find it on the Amplify website. And, you know, that's another subject altogether. But you listen to that podcast and you listen to 4 or 5 or 6 of those episodes. And the woman who's the host talks to all these people who have lots of advanced degrees in education, most of them doctorates in education. None of them learned to teach kids how to read before they got a certificate or these degrees. And now Texas is paying teachers to go back and get this Science of Reading certification on our tax dollars again. They came into the profession unprepared. And we deserve more for our teachers and for their certification programs and for our kids. And if we don't turn this ship around really quick, we are in big, big trouble. So yes, we want far better than pre-COVID restoration. We want to excel well beyond what we have seen in the last probably at least 10 years.
Yeah. So when it comes to solutions, we could talk forever about all these problems. And but what about solutions? I know all of us love Texas Education 911, and we're standing behind those priorities, which is awesome. Love that. Is there anyone in particular that stands out to you that's your favorite one? A couple that you want to highlight that you believe are some of the more important priorities we've got to make sure that we accomplish this legislative session?
One of them I love is just the focus, getting back to the basics. You know, letting kids have more recess time, let them learn how to socialize during that time, let them But then when you're in class, not all this other foofy stuff. So it frees up the teachers, frees up the students, and ideally they would be learning more. But we have to get rid of all this indoctrination that we see at every grade level across the state. Even if I may not see it in every class my child is in, I'm hearing about it on a regular daily basis from other parents, and they're not all lying. They're not all making up the same story from across the state. So back to basics. And then I really like what Aileen said earlier about transparency and accessibility to curriculum. The secretiveness and the labyrinthine, system that they have, exactly what's at her district is going on here, where you're sent to this person and then they say it's here, and all you get is a framework. That is exactly true. And I did try to get a math book because we were struggling in that. And it was the workbook, and you can't make heads or tails of it. So everybody, and I heard my niece say this, she taught herself certain subjects by YouTube. And honestly, that's what we have to do. And it's unfortunate, not in every subject. There are some really amazing, excellent teachers that we have, but that shouldn't be the case.
Right.
No, that shouldn't.
No, I have to agree with you. The back to basics is really important, and particularly, all the elements surrounding parents' rights. I have a particular interest area in cutting off all the federal funding, specifically for things that are not for kids with special needs and special disabilities and whatnot. But even that is a dysfunctional system. The capstone to all the problems that we're talking about is the one key target for Texas Ed 911, which is to get an umbrella enforcement mechanism in place, some sort of an ombudsman or some sort of an oversight arm in education, so that parents can get some due process. And what I mean by due process is when something goes wrong, parents have to expend an inordinate amount of energy and time and research to try and get a just outcome for themselves, for their families, for their child. I live in the district of Prosper ISD, which is known throughout the state and now sadly throughout the country as the district where one bus driver molested 2 young children for a year. And the protection of these children, we talk about the sexualization of the children, the library books and the content in the schools. And, look, we are literally building a culture where these things can happen. And we have superintendents like mine saying, please don't bring this up in the public eye. We'd hate to bring any attention to your girls or the district. Are you kidding me? No, we have to shine a bright light on these things. And when this kind of stuff happens, the ombudsman or the umbrella enforcement is the thing that comes in, makes, like you say all the time, Melissa, one phone call, one investigation, and an avenue to a solution for a situation like this that says you were out of compliance with this, this, and this. This is what needs to change. This is how we're going to, make a positive impact on this going forward. Parents need to know that they can trust that something right is going to be done when something goes wrong. Education is so big, and parents deserve that umbrella enforcement so we can get justice for our kids' education. We pay a lot of money in taxes, and we should get justice when something goes so wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, gosh, thank you guys so much. I know we could literally talk for hours, and we'll have to have you back on again, but I think this is a really good just introduction to what is happening in Texas with parents, and specifically that Texas Education 911 is a representation of parents all across the state. And the intention is to offer solutions to legislators. Literally, several of us are meeting with legislators and handing them legislation saying, this is a bill that we would like to see you file. This is a bill we'd like to see you fight for. And so we're taking all these problems all across the state and our knowledge of how messed up the system is and working with our legislators to make it better. And so thank you guys for what you do as a part of that, and everything else that you do. And I know I appreciate you guys so much. I appreciate your friendship, and I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for the mess of the schools. And so that's one great blessing that has come out of all of this. And I just really look forward to all of the kids and all of the parents whose rights will be protected after this legislative session. And that is something that we will definitely celebrate. So thank you guys very, very much, and have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, Melissa. I want to say something to parents and teachers who are starting to have their eyes opened.
Yes.
And And to just ask that they reach out to Texas Ed 911 and connect online. And we want to be the voice, and we need extra voices though. And I want to encourage grandparents, because nobody can retaliate against you. So if you have a grandchild who's going through something and your children are afraid to do something, be brave. And I think we heard it said before that courage is contagious. So
That's right.
Spread the courage everywhere, because our kids deserve it. They're our kids.
They do. That's
And
right.
to
Courage is
piggyback on
contagious.
that, I'll just say, oftentimes the school district might make you feel like you're the only squeaky wheel in your school or your district who has a problem with what you're seeing. Please know that we are here with you. We pray for you. We work towards solutions for you. We're united in this effort with you. So don't give up, and don't let them tell you that you're the only one. There are millions of us out here across the country, and hundreds of thousands of us here in Texas. So thank you, Melissa, for all your leadership and helping to bring this to some meaningful conversations and solutions and opportunities. Yeah, keep going, parents. We got a lot ahead of us.
That's right. We've got God on our side. He just needs lots and lots of soldiers.
Happy warriors.
That's right. Happy warriors. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.